Instead, we're going to have Seth talk about the Haystacks async platform. And then if you do want to hear me talk about the future of DevOps and how we're all screwed, vote on it as an open space topic, and we can do that. All right? Give us just a minute, and we'll get Seth set up. Round of applause.
So Haystacks Tech is the name of the company, and we sort of built our own development platform. It has its own scripting language, which is what I'm going to demo today. So just getting right into that. This is the Haystacks Tech family. I'm the founder, and I have an intern, Vlad, who's actually, he is attending a high school in Huntsville, and he's trying to get ACT score above 30 so he can get a free ride at UAH, and he's on track to do that. And I'll actually say he's my intern, but he's an immigrant from Russia. He's like 17, and he's part of a SecOps security team in his high school, and they went to regionals. So he's actually doing very well from a security, and he's really passionate about technology. The second person is KJ. He's my lead programmer. And then Nawal lives in Malaysia. She's my editor. And I have another engineer from Japan, my web engineer. And Henry Lopez runs a podcast called The How of Business. He's my business coach. The genesis of the Haystacks Tech name came from our church. We had a Haystacks potluck, which is basically a big long table, and everybody gets in line, and the table has chips and beans and lettuce, and you just go down the line and pile whatever you want on your plate, and then everybody sits down and has a good time, potluck, kind of like what we've been doing. So I wanted something like that for tech, just a buffet of technologies. You just pile on whatever you want, and then you've got the social community and aspects of that. So for me, I graduated in 2005, Bachelor of Computer Science, minor in mathematics. I was actually studying electrical engineering and computer physics with a focus on optics. I've been writing software for 37 years. I've been in the testing industry for 20 years, and I did thought leadership and strategist for about 15 years, including AI and machine learning with IBM Watson in the QA space back in about 2015. So it's been about 10 years ago. I was doing AI with IBM Watson. This is our product lineup, and so we have Haystacks Async, Haystacks Constants, which is a library. Those are fully open source, MIT license, and we have Haystacks Typing Tutor is also open source, and that's a typing app. It's built on the Haystacks Async platform, helps kids learn typing. All of this is all command line because our platform is command line only right now. We're hoping to add a GUI system in the future, and we have a product development roadmap for other products. So the genesis, how it got started with Haystacks, started out as really a JavaScript experimental COVID project, and I just called it Node.js app, and it was really just a template for building apps. And it was very, very generic. And it just kept growing and growing, and at some point, companies started paying me to develop it. So NASCO was paying me to develop it, SAP, Fontiva, Atlatl Software out of Charleston, South Carolina, and Carlots before they were bought out by Shift, and Shift went into bankruptcy, but that's another thing. So it continued to grow, and eventually it became Haystacks, and then Haystacks got forked again and became Haystacks Async. And essentially, the demo I'm giving today is essentially this webinar, which is on the QR code, so it's basically the same thing. We have 3 white papers that are in the QA space on our website. So those are significant value. Some of them, the last one is about 80 pages long. So these are more like peer-reviewed academic journal articles. A lot of value there. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, demo time, and then, of course, the thank you. We'll just go ahead and go right into the demo. I apologize. I have a little guide for myself up here I'm going to copy-paste out of. So you might see some of that, but it's also just to kind of help me as I go. So if I just do npm test, and it launches our test harness application with a test harness, and it's going to load some plugins. These are just warnings. It's for the development environment versus production environment, and I haven't set up the NV files for that. But there, it's launched, loaded the plugins, and it launched the interactive. It's an interactive command prompt, same as any other application. And it doesn't have to be the interactive command prompt. It can be also, you can drive it using argument-driven input. So you don't have to go into this interactive environment. If I don't know what to do, I can just type question mark, press enter, and I get a list of all the commands that are built into the system. If you built another application on top of this, then you can set up a special command. We've got it in our templates already built. And you just do app question mark, and then you get only the commands that are specific to your application and not all the stuff from the framework. The framework, everything that in the framework is still there. You just don't necessarily need to see it for your application. And you can see down at the bottom, there's some plugin commands because those were loaded for the plugin. And there's a command alias system here. So I typed question mark, but I could also do help, and I get the exact same thing. Or HLP, so it's command aliases, or CLS, of course, clears the screen, so we've got stuff like that. X or Q will quit the application. I'm not going to do that, of course, but then there's a scripting engine that's built into this, and I call it, it's called a workflow. So workflows is essentially a set of scripts or actions that you're going to perform, and you don't necessarily maybe not know what, but you can just do workflow question mark, and you get all the workflows. And obviously there's 1,000 of them. A lot of those are the debug, which I'm going to show you in a second, and we'll talk about that. So the basics of business rules are basically functions inside the system. The same for commands, they're also functions. But JavaScript is interesting, you probably know this. Functions can be objects, and so you can pass them around and construct them using factory methods and all those kinds of things. So we have actually done that. We've created a library of the functions, and the application has its own little library of commands and its own library of business rules, and the framework will take the application commands and the application business rules and merge them in the runtime environment with the framework business rules and the framework commands. And it turns out it does the same thing with the plugins. So it'll take the plugin business rules, the plugin commands, and load those into that same environment. So there's all of this is kind of going on, and it's more than just the plugins and the business rules. There's constants and constants validation, and there's a whole lot of stuff there. So what I can do here, I'm going to we'll go into more on the business rules in a second, and these workflows. I'll just CLS, and I'm going to go and run a command called the name application true, and it prints out what you saw at the beginning, which is the name of the application, in this case test harness. But I could do name application false, and I get the same thing but without the Figlet font, right? So you could do the same thing with the framework, the name, so I could do name framework true, and I get the name of the framework Figlet font. So you get the idea there, but I can also do about application, and I get the text that is about the application. Or the framework, about framework, right? And so those are descriptions of the framework. But you can also get the version numbers. Oops, that keeps popping up. Okay. You can do version application. Oh, I guess I typed it wrong. Version application. And you get the version number of the application or the version of the framework. Okay, so those are individual commands with a couple parameters that help you to drive that. But then I can execute a workflow, which is called the startup. And it's going to execute all of those using a set of pre-programmed parameters as part of the script. So I can just do workflow startup, and it does all three of those combined. So you can kind of see that. And then there's this. Another example of that is if I do command 01, it executes the command, which is really kind of like a hello world. It's just outputting that string. So command 02 is another command, but it does a different output. Command 03, right? And it's the same thing. But then I can also do workflow test command sequence 1. Oops, I better copy this. Oh boy, I'm sorry. This mouse is very touchy. If I go here, copy that and paste it here, and you can see it's executed both of those commands together, okay? And I could do the same thing here, so test command sequence 2, but I can also do this one. And it does all pairs of sequences. So I can do nested sequence commands using nested scripting. So that's so it's workflows within workflows. And now we can do the same thing with plugins. I could say plugin 1, command 01, and it outputs, that's from the plugin. So that output is coming from a plugin command. And the same thing for plugin 2, command 01. It's doing from plugin 2, not plugin 1. So you can have multiple plugins loaded, of course. And we can do the same thing with workflows. So workflow, plugin 1, workflow, right? And it's doing both of those plugin commands. Plugin 1, there's 2 different commands. So it's 2 commands as part of one workflow. But I could also do this and incorporate, this is now, whoops, no, there we go again. I can execute this, and it will execute, it has a whole lot of workflows. And all those workflows are executing business rules, which are executing individual functions within the business rules library. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and it's going to do a whole lot of stuff. And I'm actually using this to do performance-based A/B testing of the functions within because there's different algorithms that are implemented. And so I'm doing performance-based testing, and it'll also give me some metrics when it's done. So I'm running all this code, all these functions. It's allowing me to do integration testing. I'm not asserting against those tests, but it's running all of that stuff. And at the end, it's going to capture metrics because it's been collecting data real time as it was doing that. So now you get these data that comes out at the end, and it shows you the performance of the different functions that are called. So you can look at the average runtime and the standard deviations across multiple runs of the same function using the same input. So you can evaluate those performance of those algorithms against alternative versions of these similar algorithms. So you could do like a bubble sort versus you could evaluate all your different sorting algorithms there. So that's one example of that, and then you can do the same thing for commands. It has performance-based metrics on the commands that are executed. And of course, it's just doing a bunch of workflows here, so you see kind of the same stuff. But the next thing I wanted to talk about here is the debugging capabilities. So everything in this entire code base is instrumented with telemetry. So every single function. And you can enable or disable individual functions or an entire file of functions just by changing a flag. And I've created workflows that do that. So you could just execute a workflow, change a debug setting, and you get a different set of output because it'll be logging stuff for debugging. And when I say logging for debugging, every single function is logged for when it begins, what its inputs are, some of the stuff that might go on within that function, when the function ends, and what the function outputs. So it's a very discrete system, and we do that by intention because I try to design the system to be very extremely deterministic. So I've tried to build software with military-style specifications. Every single function only has a single returning point or exit point, and so that way we have very deterministic, very discrete, architecture. So if I come here and I just go, I think I could type this workflow warden enable. Oh, I didn't do it right. Workflow warden enable. So it's enabled some of the debug flags for the warden, which is sort of like the high-level entry point for our the framework architecture. And now if I type question mark, I get the list of commands, but you can see when the functions are entering and exiting, what their inputs, what their outputs, what the return is, all of that stuff. So it allows you to build execution maps. All that stuff goes in your logs, of course, so you can triage this stuff, and it allows you to do extremely complex debugging activities on a complex coding architecture. And I do the same thing. I can just disable it. So workflow warden disable. And if I do question mark, now that logging is gone. And we've kind of taken this up a notch, and we created themes. You saw the colors there. It was kind of a funky psychedelic color. That was our default color theme. So we got all these other themes. If I just list out the themes, there's a command here for list configuration themes. And there's a default, there's the Matrix theme, Skywalker theme, Tron theme, and Vader theme. And we have a workflow that will demo all of this. So I just go workflow demo all themes. And it's going to run the same workflow that it ran earlier, but it's going to do it for each of the themes. So it's going to swap themes out, enable a bunch of flags using the automation, and so that you'll see the different colors. And then it'll swap out the theme, do the same thing over again, swap out the theme, do the same thing over again. So it'll run for a little bit. And yeah, this is, again, the default theme. And you can see it's doing all that logging as it's running. It's going pretty fast. It's nice and performant. A lot going on there. You can see JSON objects that are being passed into some of the functions or are being returned from them. And all of that stuff gets logged. And after a little bit here, it'll switch, I think, to the Skywalker theme, and you'll see kind of like the blue lightsaber. Everything will be blue lightsaber colored. So we could take a break here for questions. There's a little bit more I'm going to demo after all of this, but we could just, if there's anybody has any quick questions while we're sort of in this in-between state.
Questions, Chad? Nothing. Yeah, he's not here. Hey, there he is.
No, I don't have it.
Okay. Are you sure?
Wayne just was wondering where I was.
He's right there. No questions.
No questions? Okay.
No questions.
So this will run for a little bit longer. I don't want to stop it because I'm gathering data as this is running. The whole system is building up telemetry on the back end.
What happens if you stop it?
If I stop it, I have to control C out and the application will be done, and I'll lose all that data that was collected. But I mean, you could save that data out to a file and persist it. Right now, it's just going to a JSON object in memory. So that allows us to keep that performance. And we have options to go ahead and there, switch to the Vader theme, so you got the red. Yeah, we have ways of outputting JSON data, of course, the files. Could be configuration data, it could be log data, it could be any sort of data that you're gathering in any way. Like I said, this entire system is fully free and open source, MIT licensed, so you could use this to go build any sort of automation or enterprise application that you want that would use a command system and may or may not have plugins that need to be loaded dynamically. You can do all of that stuff. So there's a lot of power here, I think, especially with the debugging capabilities. I think it's going to switch to Matrix.
I could sneak in a question while it's matrix.
All right.
If you've got time while it's doing its thing, what's the earliest use case you can remember for kind of putting that first root feature in, and what's the most recent use case you've heard about for the most recent feature that's been added in?
Okay, so the question was, what are the most most recent feature requests that came in or that were identified? And I think the answer to that is obviously the test harness to test itself and be able to operate this whole system. I think that was probably the first thing. I mean, I needed a way of doing systems integration testing of the entire tech stack. So that enabled the development as well. So that was part of it. I think more applied was the QA testing automation, development framework that we offer as a product. I don't want to talk about that too much, but we also have another app that is a typing tutoring app to teach kids typing lessons. And we have 700 free typing lessons. That is also an open source product, but you could tie this in with a security scanning, system, or you could use it for one of the customers I had was NASCO, was using it for business process automation, for processing claims for Blue Cross Blue Shield. So that's one of the applied examples. We use it to do a GLTF converter or a comparator to verify differences between GLTF files for 3D. GLTF is sort of it's like a XML extension for 3D files. And yeah, that was another use case, was doing comparators.
What theme is this?
I think this is Tron theme, and it's finished, so I'm going to continue going now. There's this, we have a big system behind this in the development side. I showed you there's an app or a product called the Haystacks Constants, and we have an enormous constants library because our entire code base has basically or almost no hard-coded strings, other than what JavaScript requires us to have, where you have to hard-code the word undefined, then we have to do that. But other than that, there is basically no hard-coded strings. Everything is in constants, and we use constants to inherit other constants, to inherit other constants. So we have a constants inheritance tree. And the constant system allows us, because we don't have any hard-coded strings, I believe we've actually pushed into the area of negative code entropy. So it's extremely highly organized, which goes against entropy in code. So that's kind of a pioneering thing that we kind of did, but that system is very complex. So we created a bunch of tools and commands and automation built into this system to help us manage, maintain, develop all of that stuff for that constant system. And one of them is a constants generator list. And if I just copy or click here, and I'll try to copy that out, and I'll CLS this, so we get a clear screen, and I can paste that. And what I'm doing is I'm passing a list of constants, which are some geometry shapes, hexagon, heptagon, nonagon, trapezoid. I'm passing those as a comma-separated list to this command, and it's going to use it and try to generate constants that match those terms. And it's doing sort of a brute force lookup on the entire constants library that's in memory, and it's resolving them to actually write the code that would be that constant. So now I can copy paste these and put them into my constants library, and it's sort of a way of me to write code for myself. So it's a little bit of an accelerator tool. So it's just going through that right now. My intern, Vlad, had some ideas on how I could improve this, and he has some really interesting and innovative ideas, and I'm excited to let him go work on that. Right now, he's actually building our unit testing for this, and he's making great progress there. So there's that, and then there's another one called the Constants Pattern Recognizer, which allows me to optimize the constants that are defined and allow me to create, I want to make sure I get this right here, allow me to create constants that would then be used to do the previous command. So I can look at constants that may or may not be defined, or ones that are reused across a list of words. So I'm putting the same words in here, but I don't know of those letters which ones I already have constants for. So this is going to allow me to optimize that. And the green ones are constants that do not exist. The red ones are constants that do exist. So now I know if I go create those constants, it's going to be more efficient to do that other command. My constants definitions will improve. So that's another interesting thing. There's another command in here, print data hive, which if I just do a CLS, print data hive, it dumps the entire data structure for our entire backend system. And you could actually specify, I want you to just do the configuration. So I'm going to do that again. I've actually copied this out already and did a prettify on it in Notepad++. But if I CLS this and I go print data hive and I specify just the configuration, it was quite a bit shorter, right? Because this is just the configuration data, which includes all the debug settings for those debug flags. And the theme settings are also embedded in there. So you can specify and get data dumps that way from all your JSON backend structures. I'll bring up, I didn't have Notepad++ install or open, but I can bring that up and show that. So this is the entire data structure for the entire JSON like data singleton that's in the back end. And then this one is just the configuration, which includes all the debug settings and all the configurations for the plugins. So you can see all of that stuff is there, and sort of, I just copied it in here and did a prettify on it. but you can see all of that and get access to it. If you need to do data debugging, then it's all available for you. There's another one here called Command Alias Generator. I mentioned before you had question mark versus help versus HLP. Those are all aliases of the same command. So we have a system here that will allow you to generate, auto-generate command aliases from a command name. So I've got a command, just an example here, as I'm calling it Super Wonder Woman, just whatever, it doesn't matter. Do command alias generator. Oops, I missed a typo there. I can also abbreviate this, CMD alias gen. Okay, so it's asking me for the high-level command name. So this would be the fully qualified command name. In this case, I'm just doing Super Wonder Woman, and I'll press enter. Now it's asking me, how do I want to abbreviate the word super? Okay, so I could abbreviate it a couple different ways. I could do SUPR, SPR, and SR. Okay, and now the next one, I press enter, and it's asking me for how would you abbreviate wonder? So you could abbreviate wonder as WONDR, WUNDR, WNDR, WND, and WN. And then woman, WOMN, WMN, WM, and WN. Okay, and immediately it generates. It actually solved an algorithm here called the lemur code. You could look up the lemur code on Wikipedia. Lemur code is a permutation problem. A lot of times lemur code solutions or the algorithm is used to solve things in encryption or in gaming for gambling. It's a permutation solution problem set. And we solved the lemur code algorithm in our code to be able to take those combinations and generate all the permutations that would have all these possible command aliases for that fully qualified command name. So we've solved some interesting, math algorithms in here. And the next example here is, I'll CLS this again. I showed you before plugin command 1, and I can also say list all loaded plugins. Oops, I typed it out wrong. List all loaded plugins. Okay, and the plugins there is plugin 1, plugin 3, and plugin 2. So those were example plugins that I built to test out multi-plugin management. So you can load and unload plugins. I can go through all of that stuff here. But to finish up, my dad had an Amiga computer back in the 1980s. Was my first computer. It was the first time I started programming, 1987. And there was a game in there called, it was just a video game, and it had a command in there called boss panic. And so you kind of just play in your game, and the boss walks across the hall or steps into your office. You press the tilde key, it would fill your screen with a bunch of numbers, and you'd sort of be sitting there going, oh yeah, sales are looking okay a little bit. And then your boss walks away, you release the tilde key, and you're back to playing your game. So I wanted to create an Easter egg to homage to the Amiga computer, and that's kind of what I have. It's formed a lot of why I build what I build. So I created a command in here called boss panic, and it looks like I'm scanning your hard drive on your computer at home. Or it could be, doing Bitcoin mining or hacking traffic cameras in Pakistan. It really doesn't matter. It's just generating text. It's actually what it's doing. But it's the same thing as like those Fast and Furious movies where the guys are sitting there and they got globes and GPS coordinates and stuff spinning on the screens behind them. They're just actors. They don't know what's going on the screen, but it makes them look like they know what they're talking about as they're acting, right? So I tried to do that here. I created this thing, and it looks like it's doing something. You run it on the screen behind you, and it kind of looks cool for a nice background. If you go to the website, you'll see me talking on a video, and you see the same thing running on the screens. So I do workflow, boss, panic, workflow 1, and it just starts generating random text forever. You control C to get out of it, but there was about 10 other commands that I didn't really get a chance to talk about, but the rest of the video is on YouTube, so you can go look up that and see all the stuff that was missed here. So, yeah.
Give Seth a round of applause. Thank you.
And thank you again to Mikhail. He gave up his slot for me to give this talk. He didn't have to do that. Thank you very much. And thank you to the AV team. I used to be in AV. You guys are the unsung heroes of the whole program, and the food and everything else, this entire space. It was great. I really appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome.